Just 1 second. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, a federal grand jury returned a 22-count indictment charging former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan and his close friend Michael Mclean with racketeering conspiracy, bribery, wire fraud, and extortion offenses. The indictment accuses Madigan of leading, for nearly a decade, a criminal enterprise whose purpose was to enhance Madigan's political power and financial well-being while also generating income for his political allies and associates. The charges allege that Madigan used his various elected and professional positions to further the goals of the criminal enterprise. Those positions included Speaker of the Illinois House, Representative of Illinois' 22nd District, Committeeman for Chicago's 13th Ward, Chairman of both the Illinois Democratic Party and the 13th Ward Democratic Organization, and partner for the Chicago law firm of Madigan, Getzendanner. The indictment alleges that Madigan, Mclean, and other members of the enterprise unlawfully solicited benefits from businesses and other private parties. As alleged in the indictment, Madigan and Mclean unlawfully requested that various companies and with interest in state legislation, including utility company Commonwealth Edison, pay Madigan's associates as a reward for their loyalty to Madigan, at times in return for performing little to no legitimate work for those businesses. The indictment also accuses Madigan of engaging in multiple schemes to secure business for his law firm, including work from parties with business before the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago. The indictment alleges a long-term, multifaceted scheme to use public positions for unlawful gain, including no-show or low-show jobs for Madigan's political workers and private gain for Madigan himself. The schemes describe involvement of a leader of state government, one of his close confidants, top management of a large public utility, consultants, and others. Unfortunately, this type of criminal conduct drastically undermines the public's confidence in our government. Simply put, it's not a good thing. As I've said before, we have a very stubborn public corruption problem here in Illinois. Rooting out and prosecuting public corruption has been and will always be a top priority of this office. This investigation remains ongoing. We have more work ahead of us, and we will get that work done. As I've said before, if people have information that they believe can be helpful to our enforcement efforts to hold individuals or entities accountable for their conduct relating to the abuse of public trust, whether in this case or any other case, please reach out. Call the FBI at 312-421-6700 or report the information at the FBI's website, which is fbi.gov/tips. I'm joined up here today by the FBI Chicago Field Office Special Agent in Charge Emerson Bowie and IRS Criminal Investigations Chicago Field Office Special Agent in Charge Justin Campbell. We also have with us, you see several people, AUSAs and agents who are standing behind me, who have worked tirelessly on this investigation for years. I'd like to thank each and every one of them for their outstanding efforts. And now I'll turn it over to Special Agent in Charge Bowie and Special Agent in Charge Campbell to make a few brief comments, and after that I'll take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Louch. Again, my name is Emerson Bowie. I'm the Special Agent in Charge of the Chicago Field Office. I think today demonstrates a commitment to Chicagoans, Illinoisans, and the American public of the great and the hard and the steadfast work that the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the IRS are committed to do to always keep the confidence of the public. Words like accountability, trust, and integrity just can't be words on a sheet of paper or words we say arbitrarily, but they have to be our outward sign of our inward grace in everything we do. So I commend the men and women of all three agencies for the exceptional job that they perform. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Justin Campbell. I'm the special agent in charge for IRS criminal investigation here in the Chicago field office. IRS criminal investigation is most notably known for its financial investigative expertise. Our special agents are masters of their craft. This case is no exception. The charges announced today are an outstanding example of the strong and lasting partnership that the IRS, FBI, and U.S. Attorney's Office share to rooting out public corruption. I want to publicly thank our partners at the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we look forward to justice being served on this case.
Thank you. If there's any questions. Yes.
Mr. Lush, at a news conference I attended some years ago, Mr. Madigan told us that in a good year, his law firm made more than $1 million a year. Well, can you take us through the 2.x millions and how it breaks down?
I'm not going to go into that in detail, but what I will say is what that indicates, with that amount, I assume that you're talking about the forfeiture amount that's alleged at the end of the indictment. And that is the proceeds, the ill-gotten gains, based upon the conduct that's charged in the indictment here. And other than that,
Can you tell us what you're alleging about the solicitation and the getting of business for his law firm?
Yes. So the indictment's broken down in various ways. I mean, there is a set of counts that relates to the ComEd bribery-related conduct, and those would also be ill-gotten gains that are included in that forfeiture amount as well, because those are benefits that are going to the allies and associates of Madigan, in addition to anything that the law firm did in fact receive based upon the conduct.
The Speaker has a reputation of being incredibly careful, knowing the law, knowing the rules, and maybe tiptoeing to the edge of what would be perceived as unethical, but never breaking the law. When did he cross that line? Did you find evidence that he was trying to, yes, get up to that very point of the nexus between the law and what is ethical in law?
So I don't know that I can answer your question directly, but what I can do is I can point you to the indictment. It's 106 pages. I know you've all just received that recently, but if you go through that indictment, I think you will see the answers to your question ultimately. You will see occasions that are spelled out in detail throughout that indictment, which talk about actions that are taken by Madigan and others that we've alleged to be, criminal activity. You will see additional things in the indictment as well that will talk about people attempting to conceal that criminal activity, to make it appear that it was not illegitimate. So I would point you back to that in particular.
Well, Mr. Laus, can we ask you this? And I do not mean to sound flippant with this, but through countless public officials that have been charged, the announcement made in this very room, people in the back of this room would always say, well, yeah, they got him, but they'll never get Madigan. He's too smart. This guy that never used it, he didn't text, he didn't email, he didn't write anything down. Most things were done face to face. Can you speak to the difficulty of this investigation?
What I can tell you, and I think this, you will see this in the indictment, again, which is lengthy. We use all the investigative tools that we can. You've seen us, whether it's a public corruption case or a violent crime or a narcotics case. We use a whole host of investigative tools. Those aren't spelled out specifically in the indictment, but what you do have are words that are used in conversations. You do have words that are used in documents or on emails that are spelled out throughout the indictment. And that's the core of our evidence in this case. It's the words that are spoken by people. It is the things that show up on documents. And those are the things that actually form the basis for the charges that we brought.
So when you say words that are spoken by individuals, this would include wiretap conversations?
Again, the indictment doesn't talk about specifically how the conversations, the words were gathered, but you can see throughout the indictment there are conversations that are discussed in which actual words are quoted in there.
Again, we've just received this, so still reading through 106 pages. But when did you really believe that, okay, we've got Madigan on something that does, again, cross that line, that is illegal. And further, you noted that this investigation is ongoing. So you're saying the investigation into Madigan himself continues?
This entire investigation continues, as in any case. We indict an individual. Oftentimes we receive additional information that might lead to additional charges. That may or may not happen here. I don't know. But our investigation is ongoing into, basically the categories of conduct that we've been looking at. And we've been looking at this conduct for some time. I mean, you'll recall, I believe it was in the summer of 2020 when ComEd entered, we charged ComEd in the information they entered into the DPA. And so, this has been some time coming where we have continued to look at the evidence, follow the evidence where it leads, and then ultimately bring charges when we think we can prove those charges beyond a reasonable doubt.
Michael Mclean, Madigan's longtime friend, is already charged with a lot of the same conduct in a separate indictment and is facing trial in September. Why was he added to this indictment if you can, it's a little bit of an unusual situation?
Yeah, so Jason, you'll see there were some additional charges in this indictment that were not previously alleged, one of them being the racketeering conspiracy. As I think you know, the case that's pending right now, there's a trial date that is scheduled, and so, not going to get into the details of why we made specific charging decisions and why one indictment versus another, but we thought it was appropriate to bring these charges in this fashion, including both Madigan and McLean.
Mr. Lars, can you explain, because this gets a little complicated, because you've got his role as Speaker of the Illinois House, his role as the head of the 13th Ward Democratic Organization, also his role as head of the Madigan and Getzendaner law firm. Was the fact, can you explain how these things dovetailed with each other, and was the money making, the funds directly to Michael Madigan, confined only to funds that were funneled to his law firm?
So, can answer that in two ways. So one, if you look at the racketeering conspiracy count, you'll see the definition of the enterprise, and the enterprise makes up all of those entities. The enterprise is defined as Michael Madigan, Michael Mclean, the Office of the Speaker, the 13th Ward Democratic Organization, and the law firm as well. And when we talk about the benefits that are provided, again, I would remind people, if you look at in particular count 2, which deals with the solicitation and bribery conspiracy involving ComEd, a lot of the benefits here are the benefits that are going to the political allies and associates of Madigan who received those low-show, no-show jobs working for ComEd. So when we talk about funds that are going, it's not simply legal fees to a law firm, it's also the benefits that are being provided to the allies of Madigan.
But you are alleging also that he enriched himself.
That is, yeah, that he endeavored to do that, absolutely, yep.
Mr. Lausch,
Yes.
you and your predecessors have been filing indictments against corrupt politicians for years, decades. You finally get the biggest man at the top. Does it leave you just shaking your head that people have not gotten the message that you're coming after them? And can you speak to getting the big fish, if you will?
And I don't know why I would categorize things in the same way that you have. What I would say is I think every time that this office brings another corruption case, I was here as an assistant U.S. attorney for a number of years before I had the great fortune of coming back in this job. I think we all shake our heads sometimes when we think that there's another corruption case that's happening. It happens with other crimes as well. And that's why I've kind of defined our problem as a very stubborn one. But that's why we continue to put the resources that we do into our public corruption cases. We have great agency partners, the FBI and IRS and others, in order to root out the corruption wherever we see it.
Why was I'm sorry.
The indictment mentions a meeting with Madigan and the governor to discuss big board, among other things. Is the governor under investigation?
There's no allegation in this indictment, against the governor or his staff. Say there's other people that Jewel knows in the indictment as well that have contacts with Madigan or others, and there's no allegations of wrongdoing against them either. Again, I'm sticking to the four corners of the indictment as I have.
Why was a separate grand jury needed for Madigan? I believe that the same one that was involved with ComEd also was responsible for the indictment of Mapes, Hooker. Why was a separate grand jury needed?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but nor that I can answer it anyway. So
Was there any evidence that Madigan followed through on a state job for Solis or one of his relatives?
There is, what I will say, there's no allegation in the indictment that, that the state board position was actually given.
Is there a way for an attorney such as Madigan to do this sort of work and not break the law?
Again, that goes far outside the four corners of the indictment. I don't think I can comment on that.
Couple more questions.
Mr. Lash, can we
Trace
ask?
a deadline here, Mr. Lash, if I'm recalling correctly, that ComEd agreement expired after 3 years, right? So it expires this year to cooperate?
I believe that the term on the DPA is 3 years, but look, we follow the evidence where it leads. There is no deadline essentially other than statute of limitations that we face. So, we follow the evidence where it leads. Sometimes we get there more quickly than we think. Other times it takes us longer. And I think, as you all know well, we're pretty thorough and deliberate in this shop.
And then one more technical follow-up. So this lets you, the racketeering lets you go back almost a decade. Without that, what are you limited to?
Typically, a statute of limitations is 5 years. In a lot of, generally speaking, in a lot of federal statutes.
Mr. Lash, can we ask just one protocol question? And that is, Mike Madigan is not today the Speaker of the Illinois House, but I know in previous public corruption cases with governors and other people, this would require the approval of the Attorney General. Did Washington have to sign off on that?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Can you comment at all, there's been reporting, and AT&T itself has disclosed that it's under investigation. Should we expect any indictment regarding AT&T or anybody else that is mentioned within these 106 pages?
Again, I'm not going to comment on that.
If convicted, what's the potential penalty for the performance of
Good question, and there's a lot of statutes that are charged in this indictment, and we can follow specifically on each of those. The most significant amount of time that the two defendants who are charged here could face would be a maximum of 20 years on account. For instance, racketeering conspiracy is a 20-year maximum. The wire fraud counts are a 20-year maximum. So there are other charges that have lower potential maximum penalties, but those are the largest.
We've got Alderman Ed Burke awaiting trial in the same building, and now Michael Madigan indicted. Is the Chicago way dead? I mean, there were probably the two. They were like the poster children of the Chicago way. So.
Yeah. So again, I don't know that I can comment on that, Jason. I guess what I would say is that the problem continues to be a very stubborn one. I mean, you look at what's alleged here. We have conduct that's here that's alleged up until 2019. There is and it's a decade-long, essentially a little less than a decade-long scheme that's described here. So it lasted for a long time, and it lasted up into 2019.
Do you have reason to believe that it goes back further than that? You just didn't maybe have the wiretaps or the ability to begin an investigation? Madigan's been both an attorney and speaker for 40 years, not a decade.
Yeah, that goes outside the four corners here, so I can't comment on that.
Mr. Lash, let me ask you, did this ongoing investigation, obviously it was, reported up the chain to Washington, does the fact that this was an ongoing investigation have anything to do with your staying on in the Biden administration when many of your colleagues were asked to turn in resignations?
Yeah, I can't answer that. I serve at the pleasure of the president like every other U.S. attorney, and I'm honored to do so.
Did you ask to stay on to bring this to an indictment?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Can you give us a sense, because we haven't had the chance to go through all 106 pages, what counts we should be paying specific attention to in terms of new information that wasn't in the comment, the first institution right here?
That's a great question. So count one is the racketeering conspiracy charge. Counts 2 through 7 essentially allege a lot of the same conduct, the ComEd-related bribery conduct, as I would put it, and then the counts after that are the ones that are not the ComEd-related bribery conduct. So those, I suppose, you can probably start off with if you're looking for things that are different.
Was this more difficult at all than previous investigations, just given the extent?
Last question, what was that?
Was this more difficult, intense, given both just the extent of it?
Every investigation is challenging. At the start, there's challenges throughout the way, and the great team of lawyers and agents behind me, they met all those challenges, and I'm sure we'll face more as we proceed.
So thank you.
Essentially, did all
Thank you
these
for being
people
here.
participate in it?
We had a lot of people on board to help us.
Looks like about 20.
Mr. Lausch, there are two forfeiture claims in the indictment, one for 2.85 million and one for 2.827. It's not clear to me if these two are separate items that can be combined or represent different claims over the same ill-gotten proceeds. Would it help if you could separate them for me?
So we can take I'll talk with our PIO about that in particular. One of those relates to the racketeering conspiracy, the rest relate to the other counts in the indictment, but I may need to understand the question a little better and get a little more granular, to the extent we can answer it.
Thank
So
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. You actually didn't say, I hope they learn their lesson.
And no one, nothing but rolling over and
All right, you want to just dial